Hey everyone, Liam here, and welcome to episode 11 of the Kicking It podcast. It's been a few weeks now since we did the last episode, and that's because I've been traveling. I went to the French Open actually, which is an amazing experience. It was just sunny, great weather, and it's my second year going, and it's definitely becoming one of my favorite tournaments to go to. I think it's a great experience if anyone is able to go to it to actually do that. And yeah, I managed to see everyone play that I wanted to, except for Carlos, because he was playing in the night session of the second day that I was there, and I didn't have that night session. But I did watch him on the big screen, so I saw Djokovic play. I saw Sinner play against Rublev. I saw Sabalenka play against Zheng, and yeah, it was just a great experience overall. And yeah, I'm glad to have gone. But we're now done with Roland Garros. Even though you probably listen to 10 different podcasts which tell you the same thing about how amazing the men's final was between Alcaraz and Sinner. 5 sets, 5 hours, 29 minutes. I mean, amazing 2 sets to love down, comeback, saving 3 match points in a row in the fourth set. It was just, you couldn't have scripted a better match. And I think it's given a lot of confidence into Alcaraz coming into the grass court season, because I think if Sinner had won that match at Roland Garros going into the grass court season, he would most definitely be the favourite to win Wimbledon. Now that Alcaraz has won that match, and also the way that we are seeing things spiral so far in the grass court season, Alcaraz is looking a lot like the heavy favourite going into Wimbledon. But things might change quite quickly, and things can change quite quickly. But before we get into the grass court season, let's have a little recap of a few things that I found quite interesting at the French Open. One of which being, we all know that Alcaraz and Sinner had a great tournament. So let's not focus on that for now, because of course there's been so much talk about that match since it happened, and I don't want to be repeating what other people are saying. I think mainly I want to be talking about three players from Roland Garros who, two impressed me and one sort of didn't so much. Not to say it wasn't, he didn't do well, but it just didn't impress in terms of the way he lost his match. So starting with people who impressed, obviously Alexander Bublik. I mean, that match against Jack Draper, he couldn't do anything wrong off the racket. I mean, anything he hit was perfect. Shots after shot after shot, drop shot, forehand, serve, volleys, just everything. Even like touch volleys, like little off the feet volleys. I mean, everything was working for him, and it shows that he's sort of like a Nick Kyrgios-esque type player in terms of like he's got every single thing in his repertoire he has. And when he concentrates on court and when he gives it his absolute all and is focused point after point, rather than losing his head, getting distracted by the crowd, or just getting distracted by himself, that's when he loses matches to people who he really shouldn't, like Pedro Cashin. Just as an example, that's because he said that in a UTS podcast a while back. These are the sort of players that you shouldn't be losing to, but sometimes he does lose to them. But then he goes into other tournaments, and like at the French Open, and beats Jack Draper, world number 4, playing great tennis, made the final of Madrid, playing some amazing tennis, and he beats him in quite strong fashion. And those are some of the victories that you sort of look at and you say, okay, why are you not doing that week in, week out? Why are you not doing that week in, week out? It does seem like he is actually saying that to himself a little bit more now, because he has just managed to beat, obviously, Yannick Sinner in Halle in 3 sets, of course, coming back from a set down as well, which was a great win for him. I think Sinner saw the loss as a bit more of a physical aspect, of him trying to still getting used to the grass. Obviously, going straight from clay to grass isn't always the easiest thing. And we've seen the likes of Alcaraz lose in the second rounds of Queens last year to Draper, and still go on to win Wimbledon. So these losses do happen for these top players, but it's definitely a big win for Bublik, because also it is the second time he's beaten Sinner in Halle. So it's a big win. I think it shows that hopefully the more he concentrates, the more he'll get results on tour, because he's one of those players who is just very exciting to watch, and he gets the crowd going. He's an entertainer. He might have a little bit sometimes some issues in trying to keep his cool on courts, but I think he's been a little bit better at that in the last year or so. So hopefully we see that continue going forward. Speaking of another player who impressed me at the French, Novak Djokovic, coming off of his 100th title in Geneva. You know, not much time to get over to Paris, but got to Paris in good time and still performed solidly all throughout the tournament. I mean, match after match after match, he just showed us, why he is Novak Djokovic, the 24-time Grand Slam champion. And it was, going into his matches, you just knew he had a very good draw, you could say, that allowed him to sort of find his rhythm and warm himself up into the tournament. But you also have to say that, doing that at 38 years old and going into these events and just sort of finding your paces and getting through matches quite comfortably isn't for everyone. And the real test was going into that quarterfinal against Alexander Zverev. That was going to be sort of the test of where's his game at. And to be honest, that was probably one of the best performances I've seen in terms of just game management and managing expectations and really just honing in your skills and making your opponents not be able to play to their strengths. He was bringing Sasha in. He was moving him back. He was forcing him to hit volleys he doesn't like to hit. He was putting that drop shot in. Like, the amount of drop shot attempts in that match was absolutely incredible. And he was just giving every point that one extra shot, not allowing Zverev to hit any winners. And I think Zverev both lost it mentally and physically, in terms of, physically he could have kept going during that match. But I think the mental aspect of knowing that you're playing Novak Djokovic and, you don't have that good of a record against top 10 players in Grand Slams, even though you've made the final of, made the final of 3 Grand Slams in the past, he's definitely knows that, Djokovic has an edge mentally, no matter what the score is. And I think he lost a little bit of mental edge, and that sort of also tires your body out a little bit, which in the end, Djokovic managed to sort of ride the wave and get himself into that semi-final against Jannik Sinner. And that match against Jannik Sinner, I think Sinner was just in such good form that Djokovic couldn't really do too much, because when you're playing against the world number one, who is basically hitting every single line on every single shot he is playing, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? And the fact that Sinner, managed to sort of keep things quite close early on in sets and then grab a quick break with Djokovic, making maybe a couple mistakes here and there, and just quickly converts the break, that sort of also puts a lot more pressure back onto Djokovic. And it was a bit of a a walk in the park, I would say, for those first 2 sets. You can't say walk in the park specifically, but he was managing the game very well. That 3rd set was a lot tighter, and I was kind of hoping we would see Djokovic manage to make somewhat of a comeback or more competitive match there, because I would have thought, had he won the 3rd, what would have happened in the 4th? Would Sinner, have felt a little bit more tight? Would he have felt like, okay, now, I've been in this situation before where I've won the first 2 sets against Novak Djokovic. He did it at Wimbledon a few years ago, and then he still lost the match. So it's one of those things where, there can be a little bit of a mental aspect. But he won it in straight sets, and it ended up giving us the perfect final you could have asked for at the French. And that final delivered more than what anyone expected it to ever deliver, which was great. So those are the sort of players who sort of impressed me at the French, Djokovic and Bublik. Sasha Zverev, I think we touched upon it just with the Djokovic side of things. He didn't impress me too much, just because of the fact it's like, you are a finalist here from last year. You won Rome last year. These are tournaments where you should be really trying to, he's obviously trying, but it's more like, these are tournaments where he should be getting deep, at least into the semis. He's he needs to be in contention in those semis as long as he's not meeting Sinner or Alcaraz in the quarterfinals, because obviously you're most likely going to lose there. But as the number 2, number 3 seed, you'll be meeting those guys in the semis, so you should be making the semis. He has now reached, obviously, I'll probably check whilst we're doing this podcast. He has reached the semifinals in Halle. He did lose in the final. To Taylor Fritz in Stuttgart the week before, which Taylor Fritz seems to be a little bit of his kryptonite, I guess. So it's a bit unfortunate that he's not managing to get over that hump. But he has made the semifinals here in Halle. He's currently playing against Daniel Medvedev. Medvedev won the first, Zverev won the second, and now Medvedev's up a break 2-1, serving in the third. Little bit tight. It's a very tight match. To be honest, it's only one break, so it could go back and forth for quite a bit. But these are positive signs. Making the final, and at least at the time of recording this podcast, at least the semis. He's got a couple of breakback points to make it even now in the third set. So at least the semifinals in Halle going into Wimbledon, definitely a positive aspect. He was never really spoken about too much in terms of who are the top contenders for Wimbledon going into the grass court season. So good thing he's getting a lot of good matches under his belt. Hopefully he can do some bits at Wimbledon, but Wimbledon is going to be very, very tough to perform at when you're playing against someone like Carlos Alcaraz, who, just seems to be at home on the grass. He's sort of, he said it in an interview, I believe, today or yesterday, that on grass, you can't really ever be too comfortable because you're always trying to learn how to play on the surface. You're realistically playing 2-3 tournaments max per year on the surface, and those tournaments are those 1 or 2 of those 3 tournaments are prep tournaments for you to sort of find your rhythm going into Wimbledon. So really, the only tournament you go into with maybe some, insight into, how you should be playing on the grass is Wimbledon. And that's only if you have managed to win a fair few matches in the tournaments before Wimbledon on the grass. Speaking of Wimbledon, the players to look out for going into Wimbledon, you would have said, Alcaraz, Sinner, Medvedev looking good in terms of, he's made the semis a fair few times at Wimbledon. Djokovic obviously, knows Wimbledon inside out and made the final last year on basically a post-surgery knee. So why wouldn't he be able to do that this year with, the fact that he performed better this year at the French than he did last year at the French? And yeah, it's you would say those are the sort of 4 guys who going into Wimbledon are the main guys, but you can't discount potentially Jack Draper, who has secured that number 4 seeding at the All England Lawn Tennis Club, and it's definitely going to be something to look out for because British crowd behind you, a lot of momentum, playing well. He has had some losses. He lost to Jiri Lehechka in the semis at Queens. He lost to Alexander Bublik at the French. But, over a best of 5 set match, things are a little bit different. And, he has improved his physicality and his stamina in terms of his ability to play longer matches. So why not see him, go quite deep into the second week? I don't think he'll win the tournament, but I think, he can go quite deep into the second week if he's the number 4 seed and has a good draw. So hopefully he does. But, we would have loved to see a Nick Kyrgios back at Wimbledon. Obviously, he's withdrawn. Arthur Fils has withdrawn. He would have been good to see because last year he played some amazing matches. Lost to Alex de Minaur, but de Minaur then had to withdraw from the tournament with that hip issue. And yeah, Matteo Berrettini technically is in, and I would hope to see him finally play a good tournament in terms of without having injuries. But it's tough to say because Berrettini, it seems like more often than not, he's injured, and it's a bit of a shame because he's one of the, in on the grass and in these tournaments, he's one of the best guys you can sort of watch, which is a bit of a shame that, the injuries have kept him quite far back in terms of his career potential so far. Holger Rune, made the quarterfinals a few years ago at Wimbledon, lost to, lost to Roberto Bautista Agut at Queens. Bautista Agut is one of those guys who, he's made the semis at Wimbledon before. He plays very well on the grass because he's just got that game which is just edging everywhere. And it's one of those things where, he's managing to hit those edges of the lines and making people play so deep because they're afraid that if they give him the time, he will just be edging there and hitting the edge there. And it's very much a tough situation when he is on fire to manage to beat him. And I find that, when you're playing against someone with that much experience on grass, it is tough no matter how good you are, in terms of whether you're a phenom or not. So yeah, it's one of those matches where, he could have won it, but he didn't. And going into Wimbledon, you'd hope that, he finds a little bit better rhythm. I hope that, we have a rain-free fortnight at Wimbledon. The weather's been absolutely amazing so far in London. We will be there at Wimbledon. So, please make sure to tune into everything on all our social media platforms. We'll be bringing you guys loads of content. We'll be interviewing the players there day in and day out. Also, we will be doing daily podcasts at the end of each day. So, tune in to listen to those. Be myself and Faizan and other guys in the team, to really bring you guys as much content as possible throughout the fortnight at Wimbledon. Even during qualifying, I won't be at qualifying, I'll be at the main draw, but it's going to be great nonetheless. And I really hope that we get rain-free fortnight, great matches. I'm not going to predict anything just yet. The draw hasn't come out. I don't want to jinx anything. Usually my predictions can sometimes be a bit jinx worthy. So I'm not too sure I want to put any jinxes on, the likes of Alcaraz or Sinner or anything like that just yet. But nonetheless, it's going to be a great grass court season, great Wimbledon. And yeah, no, thank you guys as always, for listening and tuning in. If you guys have any questions or thoughts or anything I said, please let us know in the comment section below. And with that, we'll see you guys basically every day during Wimbledon, for the Wimbledon podcast by Quality Shot Tennis. My podcast here, the Kicking It podcast, will be back post Wimbledon. Not too sure exactly yet when the next episode is. Probably the week after Wimbledon has finished, will be episode 12. So please, guys, tune in. And with that, please like and subscribe. It really helps us grow the Quality Shot Tennis community.